It's Wrestling Observer Radio for Wednesday, May the 20th, 2020. I'm Jim Valley along with Dave Meltzer, and following the season finale of The Dark Side of the Ring, joining us now is Dr. Martha Hart.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Martha, I want to thank you for doing the show, obviously. And I guess we'll start you saw the show last night, and I saw it twice. I watched it again at 1 a.m. After I contacted you about it. But what's kind of like your thoughts now that you've seen it?
Well, it was very emotional for sure, and although I'd had a hand in just helping sort of shape the episode, I definitely didn't have creative control. And so I was really pleased that that Vice Media and the producers of Dark Side of the Ring, Evan Husney and Jason Eisner, they took the story in a direction that I hoped that they would, but I wasn't sure how the story would actually end up turning out. But I was so pleased with it, and actually, it's a story that really should have been told a long time ago, and it's a story that I wanted out there for a long time. But, and I've had different people approach me in the past with very good intentions, but they could just never get the project off the ground. And, and a lot of it was because the WWE and Vince McMahon, they're a powerhouse, and they have very deep pockets, and they have a lot of influence in the entertainment world. And so no one ever wanted to tackle the project because, always worried about going up against them. But then Vice Media came along, and they are such a powerhouse in the entertainment world, and they weren't worried about that. And this is the first time, actually, that I've had that opportunity to really tell my side of the story in a big way and visually, because, of course, I wrote my book in very early days, and everything is in my book. But, I understand that not everybody will read my book, and so this is really nice to be able to see it on the screen and have that level of impact. And just before I forget just one thing, I really want to thank everyone that participated in the episode, and I was so pleased that they were open to sharing their experiences and their side of the story. Which really helped consolidate, what I've always said. And I really appreciated that. I appreciated that Jim Ross and Jim Cornette and Jimmy the referee and the Godfather and D'Lo and, of course, Chris Jericho all came on and, and spoke so eloquently about their experiences and how it's affected them over the years. And I can't even express how much I appreciated that they did that. And it really helped because, of course, I can tell the story, but it was so nice to hear their side of things. And a lot of them were actually there that night. So that really added to the detail and, and just how impactful losing Owen was. And so I was really pleased about that. And one thing I should mention, too, just before I forget, there's a scene, too, where, of course, when Owen died and I went to Kansas City, I'd gone up on the catwalk on my very first trip there, and I walked right to the spot where Owen fell. And then when the case, was completed and I took my children to Kansas City, I took them to Kemper Arena and I took them up to the catwalk. And there's a space on the catwalk where you can walk where you're not sort of suspended over the arena. And that's where I took them. I didn't take them right into the center of the arena, just so people know, because, I am a parenting researcher after all, and so I wouldn't take my kids and put them at risk by, letting them walk all the way, across the catwalk. But just to make that clarification.
Yeah, the piece really affected me more, and I was ready for it more than I expected, especially because it's like you have memories of certain things, and I have a lot of suppressed memories of that day. just because it was such a, everything that happened in that day, it brought it all back, and it was just so tragic, for the lack of a better word. And I think Jim Ross being on it really hit it for me, because I just remember the moment actually before he said that Owen was dead, and I was on the phone, and I don't know, how well you know Marcy Engelstein. I'm sure you know the name anyway. I was actually on the phone with her at that moment, and Brett was on a flight to Los Angeles, so nobody could contact Brett. And I just remember, and I was talking to so many people, and so many people were in denial, and so many people who loved Owen that were not in WWE at the time, were just, what's going on? And, it has to be a work, it has to be an angle. And I go, it's not an angle. He's legitimately in the hospital. And people were like, Terry Funk and I had a I don't want to say argument, but it was, it's a work. It's got to be a work. And I go, Terry, I promise you, it's not a work. It's got to be. He was in tears. He was just trying to convince him. He didn't believe it, but he was trying to convince himself because he couldn't handle it. And, none of us really could. You had to deal with so much from the death of your husband, and then immediately, you had to suck it up, so to speak. And I thought it was really something, that statement that you made about you could have gone one way or the other. One way and just, fallen off the edge, so to speak. Or the other way, which is fight. And, you had to fight this, there were so many aspects of that fight that I don't think people really can truly understand. I can't say that I can, but I know about it, between fighting WWE and then, the family situation, and then the way that whole case came down. And in the end, I know you wanted the court case. I know you wanted it in court. I know you wanted the evidence out, and then it just wasn't going to happen. And, you turned it into a positive in a big way. But still, at this point, now that we're 20 years later since, that the thing was settled, are you happy that it was settled, or do you still have that lingering thing, and I know it's not the money at this point, but just that lingering thing in you of we didn't get it to the court, so to speak?
Well, there was so much to this case that I think, people, I don't know if they really understood just the egregious negligence that was involved in this case. And if you look at how, the WWE had hired really top quality riggers in the past. There was a fellow, his name was Joe Branham, and he'd rigged Owen before. And, when a proper rigger does a stunt, there's two things that they always make sure of, that there's redundancy and that the talent never has control of the stunt. So neither of these things were done in Owen's situation. There was no redundancy. And on top of that, they were saying, you don't pull this cord until you get to here. And, and that's just so inappropriate. Then on top of that, the equipment that was used was completely inappropriate. The harness that that was used in the stunt, it was a stunt harness, but it was meant for dragging people behind a car. It wasn't meant to suspend someone 80 feet above the ground. And so what was happening to Owen as he was sitting in the harness was he was actually, he couldn't breathe, and it was cutting off the circulation as he was suspended there. And then, of course, the ridiculous clip that was used, that was a clip that was meant for the sole use of sailboats It by its very design, it was designed to fail in this type of a stunt for sure, because the design of the clip is it's meant to release on load. So the fact that Owen was hanging on the clip made it even that much more likely that it would open spontaneously. And I know in the episode, I had the clip and I showed the clip because people should see that this clip, when I said it was the equivalent of a paper clip, I meant it. And you could see how, flimsy and just inappropriate it was. And again, it's not meant for human use. It's meant for the, use on a sailboat. So there was this whole issue of the most inappropriate equipment used, unqualified riggers, and all this was done to have this, this effect where as soon as Owen hit the ground, then he would be quickly released, and then he could just go on and wrestle. But the WWE, they've been told before that, this isn't a safe way to do the stunt, and qualified riggers like Joe Branham said, no, we don't do it that way, and we won't do it. And then on top of it, they didn't like that top quality riggers, they're pricey too, they're expensive. So they cut costs and they tried to do a stunt that was, they were pushing for a stunt that wasn't safe to do. And Owen, working for a $1 billion company, never, ever questioned his safety. He thought there's, of course, this $1 billion company is going to make sure that I'm safe at a minimum. And of course, that wasn't the case. The other thing that I think people never realized is that, how ugly this fight was for me against the WWE. They are a massive company. They have very deep pockets, and they were going to stop at nothing to try to intimidate me and, just chop me off at the knees. And so, throughout the process, what they've done is they decided that they were going to sue me in Connecticut for breach of Owen's contract because in Missouri, where we'd filed the wrongful death lawsuit, they award punitive damages, and they were very worried, the WWE, about the punitive damages. If the case had gone to trial, that was a big concern for them. So they were suing me in Connecticut to try to evade this, scenario where they would have to pay punitive damages, because in Connecticut, they don't allow punitive damages. And so I had to actually go and hire a whole legal team in Connecticut and fight that lawsuit at the same time that I was fighting the wrongful death lawsuit in Missouri. So that was just beyond the pale, that they would then sue me, the widow, for breach of Owen's contract, when this wasn't about Owen's contract. I wasn't suing them over Owen's contract because they had a stipulation in the contract that all lawsuits had to be taken up against them, had to be in Connecticut. But, that's not what I was suing them about. I wasn't suing them for breach of Owen's contract. So anyway, that was, definitely one of the first salvos that they'd thrown at me. But then also to, it was so heartbreaking, the manipulation of the Hart family, because then that resulted in some of the members working against me, stealing legal documents and giving them to the defense. And it was like they had our playbook, and the betrayal that I felt, it was very crushing for me. And then other members, they were silent, and that was equally painful in a lot of ways. So, I now looking back at it, of course, like I've said many times, that, I've forgiven them all. I wish they'd had the strength to stand with me in that fight, but, they didn't, and that's really unfortunate. But I want to say that, I forgave them all a long time ago, and we've all moved on and got, like, me and my children have moved in a very positive direction. But, I really do wish them all the best, because trust me, I know how tough life can be and how hard it can be. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody. I don't wish harm on anybody. I truly hope that life has been very kind to all of them. But at the same time, I think it was important that people know this story. And I'm really happy that, people have that. I think they get that message that, how awful the story was. I want them to take away too that, there's positive things in this story too. And a lot of that comes through the good work that we do through the Owen Hart Foundation. And that is the true spirit of Owen, just everything the Owen Hart Foundation does is just a reflection of what a wonderful person he was, and I'm glad that people got to see that. And I'm really happy with the episode that everybody knew Owen as the wrestler, and that's okay, but this episode really gave them a window into the man, the person that he was. And you can see from watching the episode that, how lovely he was and how happy, and we had this very happy life. And it was, he was just such a terrific person, and everybody loved him. And, so it's nice that people got to see that. And I was really happy for the fans too, because, Owen loved his fans. He was actually, I bet you out of any wrestler, maybe out of any entertainer, he had such a good relationship with his fans, because a lot of the fans he actually befriended. They'd pick him up and they'd pick him up at the airport, and he loved people, and he he loved real people. He loved genuine people, and he spent a lot of quality time with his fans. And so he never had that sort of perspective that there was this barrier that, I'm over here, you're over there. He just looked at everyone as a person, and he thought everyone had value, and that's how he approached people. So I think because he was so approachable and so likable, it was easy. And he honestly enjoyed spending time more with the fans than he did than with the people that he worked for.
What was your emotions like, and the decision-making of going to mediation, settling? Because, any lawyer would tell you to settle. That's kind of like what lawyers do.
Yeah,
but at the same time, your motivation was very different from most people who were involved in a case like this. And I've been told that kind of from... and I think to an extent Brett too. I know because Brett was very supportive at that time in your life. This thing to me, in a sense, almost started at Owen's funeral because it turned into a television event, and I think that was exactly what you didn't want. I remember from that period was like I watched the thing on television, and at the same time I had already been told that you did not want this thing on television, and there it was.
Yeah, I know. Well, this was always the problem with the WWF at the time, now E, was the incredible lack of respect for Owen and for me. And and you're right. Well, it started even before the funeral, because of course that when Owen fell to his death and he died in the ring, they just scooped him up like he was a piece of garbage and hauled him out of there. And then they paraded match after match onto a canvas that had Owen's blood, but also the boards under the ring were broken. And there was a dip in the ring, and the wrestlers could feel where the dip was. And so again, just that lack of, regard for human life. That was just the first sign of what I was dealing with. And then at the funeral too, I'd invited them. I wanted them to come. I wanted Vince McMahon and his family to come. I promised Vince that, if he was to come, that I would treat him with respect, and, that he didn't have to worry. I wanted him there. But I requested, please don't take any footage of the funeral. Just come as a guest, because I've invited you and I've invited your company. And And I stuck to my word. I greeted him. I was pleasant to him. And then that night, all I saw was footage of the funeral all over his show, and they were making money off of it. And, then all their decisions were so bad, so poor, right from the start. Just getting Owen off the ring and just making sure they didn't have to stop the show because they didn't want to be at risk of losing a single penny. And then, making sure that they had their camera crews there to get that footage and broadcast it and make more money. And, that's all they cared about was money, money, money. And yet they couldn't even spend the money to make sure that Owen was rigged properly. So, all the way through the lack of the lack of respect, and then on top of it, how awful they were to me, suing me and manipulating Owen's family, and it was just so awful, all of it. So, there's just so many layers. And then, even on top of it, I remember that they had gone to the newspaper and they said that they paid for Owen's funeral, which they did not. They paid to come to the funeral, like every other person, but they certainly didn't pay for Owen's funeral. So again, it was, just this constant, and I'll tell you, WWE, they are a PR powerhouse. They could get their message out fast and quick, and it was like lightning. I'm one individual too, and I'm from Canada, and you can imagine the fight that I had in Connecticut and in Missouri, and I'm all the way from Canada, so that was a lot of work for me always to be traveling to these places, and I went to every deposition. I sat through every deposition. The only one I didn't sit through was the medical examiner. But I read every affidavit. I studied everything about this case. And it wasn't about money for me ever. I've always wanted to go to trial because I wanted accountability. I wanted the truth to be known. I wanted that out there. And, as we sort of went through the lawsuit and all the WWE was always trying to do was just muddy the waters, get away from the actual case of what actually happened. And they were doing a good job of it because they were, detracting from the case, like with these, sort of like red herrings, like, oh, we're going to sue her over here, and that'll then they'll have to deal with that, and we'll manipulate the family, and then they'll have to deal with that, and just making it such a mess. And so then what was happening, because my lawyers, like you said, normally lawyers, they think, well, this will settle. My lawyers were trial lawyers, but of course, as a lawyer, they always are hoping that, they can resolve the case and they don't have to go to trial. And my lawyers were no different. They were always approaching me and saying, about should we put a number on the table? And I told them in no uncertain terms, don't even ever bring that up to me. And they knew that my mindset was that, no, we are on the road to trial, and there's nothing else. There's nothing that's going to stop us from achieving that goal. And so, but the problem is that even if you go to trial, you should put a number on the table, because when you do that, then the interest starts running. And so my problem was, because I told my lawyers, we're never putting a number on the table. So then the defense, they could delay. They kept delaying because they had nothing to lose, right? So, and this is what my lawyers were saying, and then I thought, geez, it's almost like, they're laughing at me because I won't put this number on the table, and they can just afford to delay forever. They have the deepest pockets. They can drag this on forever. So then, as a strategy, I said to my lawyers, let's put a number on the table, which was a extremely hard decision for me. But I said, I'm only doing it as a strategy to stop them from delaying this case. And so we put the number on the table. And so what happens is they'll have 60 days to accept that number as a settlement. And if they don't, then once they don't, then it's like the timer starts ticking. Then it's like now you're accruing interest on that amount that's been put on the table. So when we got to the 60th day, I never thought they'd accept the number we put, but then I got worried and I panicked because I thought, oh my God, like what if they actually accept it and then we settle and then this is over and where's my justice? And, because again, I had this mindset that we needed to go to trial. And that's what I was thinking, that, I've gone through all this and where's my justice going to be? Because I looked at settlement like a failure. It's like, no, this needs to go to trial. Like anything less than that is a failure. So then I phoned my lawyer and I said, I'm worried. What if they accept this? Then where's my justice? And she said something that just shook me to my core and something that I didn't ever even think of. And she said to me, Martha, at the end of the day, no matter how this thing ends, it's always only going to be about money. And I said, what? And then she said, well, no one's going to jail. Nobody gets convicted. At the end of it, this is all it's about is money. And when she said that, I never thought of it that way because I always just was thinking, I want to go to trial. I want justice for Owen. I want accountability. And when she said that, I never felt such despair in my life that, I thought all this work, everything I've done, this is all it's about is just money. At the end of the day, it's just going to be a check. That's it. And so then at the same moment when I literally was at the bottom of the barrel, then I don't even know where it came to me, but I was just like a flash of light. I was like, you know what? I know what I'm going to do with this money. I am going to start a foundation and I'm going to create my own justice. If I can't get the justice I'm seeking through the legal system, I will create my own form of justice, and it's going to be beautiful and it's going to be bright and it's going to be positive and it's going to reflect everything that Owen was. And I thought, I don't know anything about starting a foundation at all, but that's what I'm going to do. When this is all said and done, I'm going to take that money and I'm going to start this foundation, and that's going to be my justice. Success is the best revenge, right? And so then you know what? It was like a weight had been lifted off of me because I thought, no matter how this ends, whether we go to trial or if it's settled, then I know what I'm doing after this. And so then it just changed my view, and it made it okay that I could settle this case. And then because then I was like, I know what I want to do. I want to do something so great, and I'm going to create the most beautiful thing. So that's what happened. And then you're right, like you mentioned, Brett, and he was very supportive, and I always appreciated that. I still appreciate it to this day. With Brett, we had, through the lawsuit, he wasn't friends with Vince at the time. He was like in a big battle against him over the whole Montreal thing. And he had come to us and, was asking if we settled this case ever, like that we could get his wrestling footage included in the settlement, which was, an odd request, but I didn't think that was even possible. But, I appreciated his help and I wished I could have helped him back. But when that didn't happen, because of course this case was about Owen's life and death and the negligence, and it wasn't about Brett's footage. But when that didn't happen, then Brett got very upset with me. And it was hard, I remember I cried when he yelled at me about it. And if I could have helped him, I would have, because to this day, I always appreciated that he helped me, and he did help me, and it meant a lot. But then after that, I think his footage mattered so much to him because, he wanted that legacy, and he was a very good wrestler, and I knew that wrestling was, such a big part of his life. And so anyway, as it turned out, then he went and befriended Vince, And he did tell me once, he said, if I ever befriended Vince again, my soul would shatter. And, but then that's what he did, because he wanted that footage and he wanted that legacy. And that's fine. It's like, and he could have done that and, got his footage or whatever. But then it just seemed like he sort of started turning, like he turned towards Vince, but he turned against me. And then it became sort of this battle where then he was trying to be an advocate for the WWE and, really pushing to get Owen into their Hall of Fame, which, I always said, like, that's never going to happen because this company is responsible for his death. And not only that, just the level of disrespect that they've continued to show, like, from start to finish, it wasn't going to happen, So that's the unfortunate story with Brett, that, things really shifted with him. And, but again, Brett, he really helped me, and I don't care what his agenda was. I'm always going to be grateful that he did help me, and I wish the best for him too. But, you can forgive people, and I have, like I said, forgiven them all. But that doesn't mean that you have to have a relationship with them. And, I see the Hart family, and when I do, I'm always polite. And, this was a family I cared about at one time, and, and I still care about them. And I still wish the best for them. So, and I tell my kids that too, that, if you see them, you be polite and you be respectful. Because I think no matter what people do in life, you should always, it doesn't hurt to be nice to people regardless. And, at the end of the day, what's done is done. And unfortunately, the damage is done and it's irreparable. We can't have a relationship because, like any relationship in life, once you break the trust, you have to have trust in order to have a relationship. So that's, like I said, it's sort of the casualties of war, and it's just unfortunate that it all happened that way. But the whole story is unfortunate, And I mean, I think because I like to look at the positives, and I think there are still a lot of positives, and definitely the Owen Hart Foundation is a huge positive.
Kind of tell us about the Owen, the goals of the Owen Hart Foundation, and the fact that, you used the settlement money to help people get into homes, get into colleges, things like that.
Well, education was always really important to me and Owen. And so that's sort of like I thought, well, I want to make that our mandate, education, and have it sort of be the umbrella of the foundation, because you can fit a lot of things under that umbrella. And so we have 3 signature programs. So we provide scholarships to individuals in need. And then also we have a housing component where we help people to purchase homes. So we literally give them the down payment to purchase a home, but they have to go through a 2-year financial literacy program, just so they can learn how to budget and, save their money and what home ownership means. And, there's a lot to owning a home too, and how to budget for all the things that can happen, like when you own a house, things breaking down, whatever. But so then we have that component. And then we also have a partnership component, which is amazing, because I love to collaborate with other organizations. And so we've been able to do so many great things. We help schools all over the world. We partner with For the Love of Children Society. We partner with Amnesty International. We partner with the Calgary Zoo. We just have endless partnerships, and they're fantastic. We love the partnerships. So we're able to do so much good. And, my son, he's a lawyer, and he's actually, he's doing his master's in international law in England, but he's back in Canada now because of COVID. But he wants to pursue human rights law. law. And so we have a whole portion of the foundation that really reflects that. So, that's where we partner with Amnesty International. But then my daughter, she's a journalism graduate, and she writes for this really cute animal magazine. And she has an animal humanitarian column in the in the magazine. But so we have a component too where we really support animal rights. So we partner with the Calgary Zoo. They have a conservation program, and so it's nice because I had kind of like basic needs interests, right? And even we have a fund at the Alberta Children's Hospital where, we help families with basic needs. Like if they go to the hospital with their sick children, but they don't have the money for a hotel or for food, our fund takes care of things like that, basic needs. So I was always sort of about I want to help people at the ground level. But then, my kids came to me and they were like, Mom, there's so many other really great causes, my son with the human rights and my daughter with her animal rights and even the environment, such a big, cause right now, and all really amazing. So we've kind of expanded our vision. Again, it's all about education because, education is power. You inform people and it's even getting back full circle to our episode, you inform people and you show them, and then they know, once you know. And so, I think education in all forms, whether it's sort of academic or in trades or whatever, it's such a positive thing. And you can never go wrong, being educated in any form. So we really support that. And that's sort of like I said, our umbrella, and and that's the nice thing too. I'll just mention about our scholarship program. We give bursaries, and my whole thrust was that we lowered the bar. So if kids in high school, if they get into any program, they can apply for the scholarships. So so we don't make it where it's the most scholastic kids, because the whole point was to encourage kids that, yes, you can go to university and you can get scholarships to go, even if you're not getting 90s in school. If you just even get accepted into anywhere, even a trade school or art school or anywhere, then that's great, and we will support you. So the scholastic kids are always going to find scholarships. They will. It's the kids that are just, right, at the bar, that they have a hard time finding funding, and that's a shame because, lots of kids too these days, they have to work, they work part-time or they help their families, and if they have a job, then they can't dedicate all their time to studying. So they're not the kids that are going to get the 90s, not that they couldn't, but they just don't have the time. So we really wanted to catch those kids like a safety net, and be able to say yeah, we got you, and you go to school and get your education and you can do it. So it's about not just rewarding the best, but it's about encouraging others to reach their full potential.
When you look back, the stuff with Oj and the trains and everything, it's just, in many ways heartbreaking, because I think one of the things in wrestling is there've been a lot of tragedies in wrestling. Not as many in the last few years, but there was a period from, for decades where there were, it was one after the other. And Owen's, to me, Owen was always the different one, because so many of them were drug-induced and things like that, or party-induced or whatever, which, and Owen was not that guy. And Owen's situation was, 100% unavoidable. It was a stunt that had no business. It never should have been done. When it was done, it was negligent. It served no purpose. Whatever the motives were bad motives anyway. And then, everyone, I've known from other families that have gone through this, that everyone, they're sad about the wrestler and this and that, but they don't realize that so many of them left young kids behind. And, when I saw, Oj, again, at 7, you're going to remember stuff. and you have the footage and everything, and it was really was a heartbreaker. And with Athena, at 3, right, when Owen died, I mean, it's like, I couldn't even remember anything at 3, and I mean, it's just so, and Owen, you could see, and I knew him a little bit, as you know. He was a fun guy. He was a good-hearted guy. I was actually, the first time he was in WWE as the Blue Blazer, so this would be like the late 80s, I think I was with him the night that he decided to quit, because he was in his hotel room with me and one of my friends, who was a better friend of Owen's than I was, when he called Stu and pretty much told Stu, that he was going to quit, and he was, kind of talking to us about going to Japan, and wrestling in Japan, and that was kind of like what he wanted to do, and he wasn't really happy in WWF at the time. And a funny story is Owen often roomed with Ultimate Warrior, and he was telling us like funny Ultimate Warrior stories and everything. And Ultimate Warrior was like, how about, could I go too? Which is funny because Ultimate Warrior had so much success about a year later, and was already on that verge already. He was already a big star in WWF by that time. And Owen was like, because Ultimate Warrior was not a great wrestler. Owen was obviously a fantastic wrestler. And he just goes, Jim, Japan's not for everybody. Trying to, tell him, kind of like, it probably wouldn't be best for you, but it is best for me. But Jim was very much, interested in going to Japan, and which is just an interesting footnote in wrestling history, because I remember when that all went down. But I just felt so bad for your daughter, especially in the sense of, she had this dad who loved her, who was a great guy, and she was robbed of all the things that people expect, that kids grow up with a cool dad, So that was like really heartbreaking to me watching the show last night.
Well, for me as a parent, I think that's the saddest thing for me is that, when something terrible happens in your life as an adult, you go through it and it's sort of situational. You go through that hardship, but then, you recover and you hopefully come out of it better. But with kids, when something so traumatic happens to them, that has lifelong effects. And so that for me as a parent is the saddest thing. And, what also is sad is when I look back when Owen was here and we were a family, and, I was such a happy mom, and, and then when Owen died, it changed, because then it was just me. And so then, you carry all that worry, because I always thought, well, I have to make sure that these kids turn out good, because it's all on my shoulders, that if they don't, then it's going to be all on me, because I'm all they got. And, and that was the really hard thing too, because sure, they lost their dad, but then also too, my attention was divided, when I had to go through the whole court case and everything, and not to mention, how sad I was about everything that I was dealing with too. So it was really hard to, and I really tried to make sure that the kids didn't necessarily see that side, but at the same time, I didn't want to, let them think everything was okay either, because it wasn't. And so they were aware that things weren't good and all of that too. But that's the hard part too for me, is that, and I know this just because that's my job in real life. That's my doctor hat that I wear is, I'm a parenting researcher. So I know that kids, they'll if you have two great parents, that's the ultimate thing, but you can have one great parent and that will get you through. And I know that too. So, but that's the hard part for me, is that I know that my kids, their lives would have been different. And, I think that they would have similar personalities, but, everything affects people. You are, what your whole childhood is too. It's all rooted it's all into how you develop and shape and everything. But they were robbed of that. They were robbed of having a wonderful dad, because he was an amazing father. And, it's sad to lose a parent, but it's just tragic to lose a wonderful parent. And he was such a great dad. He loved being a dad. He loved all the kid stuff. He was like a big kid. It was like having 3 kids, because, he loved to play, and he was always like, that was for him, that was golden time, was spending time with the kids. And that was our life. We did everything with our kids. We took them everywhere. We never went on a trip without our kids. We took them even as babies. Oj's first trip, he was just 4 weeks old. We went to Indianapolis. And, and Athena too, like we traveled all the time with the kids. We took them everywhere, to Germany. Well, and you saw the footage of Oj in Japan,
right,
so
footage,
they were like, there was no divide. We were like a united family. And, and I'm glad that they, Oj really has a lot of memories with his dad. And because he was that much older, and, he really, things stuck. And because we had such good quality time, and maybe too, because Owen, he wasn't there all the time. So then Oj really has vivid memories of, the time that he did spend with dad, because that was precious. And Athena, unfortunately, she was so young that she does have some memories, and she definitely remembers, her dad with all the animals. And it's just funny how she's such an animal lover. She always was. She just always loved animals so much. But so it's nice that that's what sticks out to her is, all the animal stuff. And and it's funny, that little clip of her on the horse, because then when she got older, she actually was an equestrian rider, and she was really great at riding. So, but now she's kind of shifted. Now she's kind of like, well, I don't know if the horse really wants me on its back. So, but at the time she was a great rider when she was in high school and stuff. So.
For you, so much of this, when I look at the situation from you lost a lot. You have the memories of a certain number of years, but when it comes, let's face it, you were robbed of a lot. You can kind of, like the kids are robbed of a lot, but you were robbed of, whatever it is, 40 years, 50 years. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's got to be, it's I don't know how to say it nicely, but I'm just trying to put myself kind of in your shoes. There's, and it never should have happened. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
It's just from your situation, you couldn't let it be the tragedy, but it was, without a doubt.
Yeah. No, it really was. And I guess, like I'd mentioned in the documentary, that, when I lost Owen, it was so devastating. But at the same time, it's like, well, I can't let everything that we had be for nothing. I can't just let everything fall apart now. We had all these goals and all these dreams, and I guess, for me, I had sort of 2 separate lives, because I had a life when Owen was home, but then I had a life when he wasn't home too. And so then that's it was lucky for me that I could just go into full mode when, because I was already used to not having him all the time. And, but it was so hard, because the thing was that, when he wasn't home, it was all just the work stuff, it's like, just get all the tasks done. When Owen came home, it was the reward. Now it's family time, and now we're together. And then it just went from where I never got any rewards. It was just work. And even times when the kids were sick, or, you just needed that extra support, and it wasn't there. And that was just heartbreaking. And don't get me crying now, Dave. I'm already emotional. It's been a tough week. But, yeah, like it was really hard. But, then what I did was I decided that, like I had other goals that I was working towards too. And I decided that, that's going to be, like I was working towards other goals that were kind of in slow motion because, I couldn't just go to university full time or things like that, because it's like, well, you have a family and you have like, other things that need attention. And so then that's what I did. I shifted my focus. And, I was working on my education when Owen died. I was at university. And then I just put so much effort into that because then I decided that, the career that I always wanted, that's going to be my goal. And my kids are going to be my goal. And I thought I only have one shot at being a parent and raising these kids properly. And they're going to get all my attention. I'm not dividing it. It's going to be them, and I'm going to focus on my career. So that's what I did. And I was really lucky that, I got into Cambridge University in England. So we moved to England, and we lived there for quite a bit of time because I did my master's and my PhD there. And so that was really a great experience, actually. And it's nice because now Oj actually is in university in the UK, too. So England's like second home for us, for sure. But then, and I was lucky enough, I worked for the University of Cambridge for, about a year and a half. But then I wanted to come back home. And I was so lucky that, as soon as I applied to one job at the University of Calgary, and I got it, and that's where I've been ever since. And it's wonderful because, now for my career aspirations, I really feel like I've put my signature on the scientific community, and our research team, me and my boss, Dr. Letourneau, we actually developed this incredible parenting intervention called Attach. And it was funded by Harvard University. And now we just received a very huge grant from the Canadian government to scale the project across Canada. So for me, that's just incredible success, like on a sort of a professional level. And yet, like, it's still wearing that same hat of being able to help people. So I really love that. Like, all my layers of my life all sort of intersect. And another thing I should mention that probably people don't realize is that I'm such a movie lover, and I'm actually the vice president of the Monaco International Film Festival. It's the only film festival in the world. Yeah, and it's the only one in the world that it promotes nonviolence in film. So I love the film festival there, and I actually have a movie blog. And my movie blog, it's a really positive blog, and it talks about, like, it's just a fun thing, but it's, my take on it is find the meaning of life through the movies you watch. So I write about movies. I do like a review of sorts, but what I do is, I say, like, what's the takeaway message of this movie? What does this movie hope you learn about life? Or, so I always, talk about, like, what you should learn by watching this movie. And then I always try to put a little personal element in, if I can, I always do, find some common thread with the movie. And it's really fun. And I actually did a review on the docuseries on the, Owen Hart's final days. And so I hope people go check it out because, I really think there's, for all the sadness, again, like, there's some really positive life lessons. And, so go check out the movie blog and see what I think the takeaway message is from my own docuseries. So,
I read it. I really enjoyed your analysis of Groundhog Day, and I thought it was very poignant for everyone's lives right now. So I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, thank you. That's so sweet. So, yeah. Well, I love it, and I love to write, and it's just really fun. And, I don't rip movies apart because I always think, no, you know what, every movie, even if it's silly or corny corny or, not well made or whatever. Like they have something to say, and that's what they're trying to do. Movies is convey a message. What's the message, right? What can you take away?
What was it like? Okay, so I know from when you were in with Chris Jericho, and you mentioned one of you and Owen's favorite movies was Father of the Bride, which is an interesting, but later, you had Steve Martin perform for you guys for your foundation, right?
Yeah, we did. And you know what, my daughter, I have to tell you, she did something so sweet. She took the DVD that we had, like a Father of the Bride, and she had Steve Martin and Martin Short, because we had them both, and they're both in Father of the Bride. So she had them both sign the DVD for me behind my back and as a gift for me. So that was so sweet of her. So I have that like in, my little office of memorabilia. But no, you know what? That's the other thing too, that with the Owen Hart Foundation, every year we do a high profile entertainer event. And we have had so many amazing guests. So we just had our 20th anniversary, as you know, and we had Jerry Seinfeld for our 20th anniversary. We also had him for our 10th anniversary, and he was so terrific that I said every year, it was kind of a running joke, we need to get Jerry back for the 20th. And so we'd even tell his team, don't come to Calgary because we want you back for the 20th, And then, but who knew if he was actually going to still be performing. And you know what, sure enough, he was, and he came in, he did 2 shows. We were totally sold out. It was great. But we also have had incredible guests. Like we had Robin Williams, which, oh my God, that guy, he was so amazing. Oh, we just loved him so much. The realest guy on the planet, just incredible. But, we had him. We had Ringo Starr, which I loved Ringo Starr. He was so incredible. And just the life he lived, he's such an icon. And he was just lovely. And, we have it all on our Owen Hart Foundation website. And I even did these little sort of blast from the past where I give sort of viewers extra little details about the event. We had Seth Meyers, who was great, and he forgot his passport and he almost missed his flight, and we barely got him in time. So I tell little funny stories, but Owen was such a funny guy, and that's the other thing. Everyone will tell you, the prankster he was. And you brought up Ultimate Warrior, and I have to tell you, Owen would do this little trick on Jim. They'd be on a flight, and Owen would be sitting behind Jim on the plane, and Jim would fall asleep. And he always had his he'd have not wrestling boots but cowboy boots on, and he was always looking the part, right? And so Owen would take the peanuts and he would throw them into Jim's boot while he was sleeping. And then Jim would wake up and his boots would be full of peanuts, and he'd be like, Owen, I'm making peanut butter in my boots again because of you, but he would just do these little pranks that were harmless, but he was always just joking around with people, and just, he was just amused by, kind of pranking people all the time. And it's interesting because I remember saying to him very seriously, Owen, you need to stop joking around. And he just looked at me with this funny grin. He's like, I'll really try. And I just thought, what do you mean try? You just don't have to do it. But he couldn't, it was too big of an ask because that's who he was. He just was playful, he's a playful guy, and he just liked to do these little silly pranks. I mentioned on Chris Jericho on his show that Owen would take the tea bag, and it's hooked to a little string, and he would take it and he would tape it into the cupboard. And then when I'd open it, it would fly out at me. And he did it because he knew I was terrified of mice. And it was just, he would do it just to get all that work, just to get a 1 second reaction, And he would do it. He was strategic, he didn't do it all the time. He would just, when I wasn't expecting it, then all of a sudden, the tea bag would come flying out of the cupboard at me. But, little things like that. And I have to mention too, with the Dark Side of the Ring episode, there is an encore presentation. I think they show it in about a week.
It's next Tuesday at 8:30, just for people
next
in the U.S.
Tuesday at 8:30. So it's worth the watch because there's an added 4-minute clip of Owen the prankster. And everyone, well, not totally everyone, but almost everyone who's in the episode, telling a joke that Owen played on them. So I tell it like something he did to me. I won't say it now because I want people to watch it, but it was just priceless. It's a really cute 4-minute clip about Owen the prankster, so it's worth a watch.
When you started dating, at 15, did Owen or the family protect the business around you?
Yeah, at that time, excuse me, when I dated Owen, wrestling wasn't a big interest, and so I didn't really ask about it or anything, but I didn't actually know that it was like a setup because they were really good then about making it real. Like those guys, like they should have gotten Oscars for because they were so good at playing their roles of, and making people believe that it was real. And so, I think people always sort of suspected, but it's kind of like with boxing or whatever that, I think people accepted it generally that it was for real legit. But then there's always that possibility that with any kind of one-on-one sport, you could always rig it, I suppose. Right. So, but yeah, there was a time when, they really followed it through and they didn't let people know sort of the family secret, right? That the finishes were arranged and things like that.
Do you remember when you got, as they say, smartened up?
Yeah, well, I do remember it was kind of like there was a conversation and Brett said to Owen, is Martha smart? And then Owen said, no. And then later I said to him, what do you mean, Owen? I'm not some bimbo. I'm actually quite intelligent, And then he had to tell me because I was actually kind of mad at him for thinking I wasn't smart. And then he told me. And it was really nice actually because we were at a point, I guess, in our relationship that I took it as like a real sort of level of trust that he would trust me with with that sort of information, right? And, and that's the thing, though, with when I met Owen, we both sort of had a plan that we were going to go to university, and Owen was going to be, he was going to be a school teacher. He wanted to be a phys ed teacher, and that's what he was going to university for. And he was a very good athlete, and he was a 4-letter letterman, because he played football and he wrestled and he also did track and field and rugby. But he got a scholarship to University of Wrestling, an amateur wrestling scholarship. And, his dad was such a lover of amateur wrestling. So Owen, out of sort of respect for his dad, and his dad was so proud that, he went to university on the wrestling scholarship. But, university is tough, and when you do a varsity sport, it's even tougher. And so it's hard for him to wrestle and then keep up with his studies as well. So he was in the wrestling business, or he was at university, and this was right around the time when Vince was buying up all the small territories, and they were trying to keep the business going. Owen's brother Bruce was the booker, and so Bruce had come to Owen and said, we're really struggling, and Dad's hemorrhaging money, and we really need some help. And, geez, you're so athletic and you're young and you're a heart, and, that would carry a lot of weight. Do you think you could come and help Dad and just, help him even just for the summer or whatever? So that's what Owen did. That's sort of how he started in the business. And, and of course he was a natural athlete, so he was very good at it. And growing up in the wrestling business, he really understood the philosophy and the psychology behind the sport and stuff. So, but his intention wasn't to stay in wrestling as a career. And he was often always trying to get out of it for years. He applied to the fire department every year. And at that time in Calgary, it was really hard to get on the fire department. You had to have a university degree, and he hadn't finished his degree because he'd gone to, help his dad, and then it kind of picked him up and carried him away from his original goals and plans. And so, that was really crushing for Owen, because Owen's brother was a firefighter, and so was his brother-in-law. Yeah. And so he knew that life, and he liked it. Like, he thought, that's the perfect life. These guys are great. And it fit with his personality, because Owen was a very kind, caring person, always trying to help people. And it really would have suited him very well. And he was a real sort of social guy. So, how firefighters, they work 4 days on, 4 days off. And he would have loved that whole life of, like, living in the fire hall with the guys, but then coming home. And, and he was strong. He was a big, strong guy. So he would have actually made a super wonderful firefighter. But, he never had success. Like, he would get through the initial exams, and he'd get to a certain point, but then he never get past that barrier, because they'd always pick the guys that had, like, university degrees, and that wasn't him. And so then another job that he tried, he was an American citizen and a Canadian citizen, so the dual citizenship. So he applied also at the, to be a customs agent, because in Canada, you have to go through U.S. customs in Canada. So we have American customs agents that live in Canada, and he thought, well, that would be ideal, because he's American as well as Canadian. He could live in Calgary and work as an American, though. And again, no success. And so it was kind of coming to that point in our life, like, he'd wrestled. It was always a good plan B, because it was a good living, and, it definitely provided a living for us. But he always wanted to sort of escape wrestling. And then it got to a point where he realized, that it just wasn't going to happen anytime soon. So then we embraced it as, like, okay, well, we had a plan, like, he'd work for maybe another 10 years in the business if his body could put up with it. And then when he would be done with it, he really liked to build things, and he loved building bicycles. That was sort of his favorite hobby. And I actually have a bike in my garage right now that he built. And it's the cutest bike. It's purple, and it has a basket, and this is what he liked to do. He loved working with all the gears and the pedals, and he would just take scraps, and he would just, like, I don't know, it was like magic, he just build a bike with it. And that's what he thought. He would like to maybe open up a shop, and that, he would have a bike shop, and he would just, like, tinker around and fix bikes and do this kind of fun stuff. And we did a lot of biking too. So that was sort of the goal for him. And, that's, like, how life picked him up and took him far away from his original plans,
When did you figure out, or did you see, because I remember Owen, probably from his first week of television for sure, because I would get the tapes of Stampede Wrestling, and I vividly remember, because when Owen started, he was like the hot new thing in wrestling. He was so talented from day one. When did you figure out? Because, I had a group of friends, and we would watch, tapes from Japan and everything like that. But the Calgary tapes, that was one of the things that we would, once a month I'd get a tape, and it'd be, 4 shows. So before Owen Hart main events, this is the first year he was wrestling with his brother-in-law Ben Bassarab and Hase, and you were there at that era.
Yeah.
When did and he was he started, and he was in the main events. I don't know, like right away. He was the top guy right away. He was, he was so talented. Did you ever watch, like, wrestling with him, like, whether it's Dynamite? Because I would watch him and go, he's emulating Tiger Mask and Dynamite Kid, and Brett. And I could watch him and go, like, this guy has studied, but he's also a natural at this. What was the point when, did you figure out how good he was right away, or when did you kind of figure out, he's pretty damn good at this thing?
Well, he like I mentioned, he was a natural athlete. He was good at all sports. So he, and then on top of it, having been, raised in a wrestling family, they had a big wrestling ring in the back garden, and so he could go and practice and stuff too. But he was a real natural athlete, and he was very acrobatic, and so that really helped his style. And I remember watching tapes with him of Tiger Mask, and he was a Japanese wrestler that I think he was sort of the first that did this incredible flying style, and so entertaining to watch, because Owen was so acrobatic, then he could emulate that style, and he really liked that. And he had incredible matches against Hassie, who is just a very sweet guy on top of being like an exceptional athlete too. Now is a senator in Japan. Yep. So he's actually now in the cabinet, in Shinzo Abe's cabinet. So he's I'm not surprised.
The Minister of Sports, Education, Technology. I forget all of them, but those are three of them. I mean, he's a real major guy in the Japanese political world.
I'm not surprised at all, because Hassie was a really bright guy. And so, and he and Owen were good friends. And so they had really great matches. And I was lucky enough to get to go with Owen a couple of times to Japan.
I understand you have a pro wrestling tee store with new Owen Hart t-shirts.
Yes, exactly. No, I do. Sorry, that was you heard that beeping. That was just my daughter calling. So sorry about that. But we were really, really thrilled that, for the longest time, there was no merchandise on Owen because everything filtered through the WWE, and of course, I refused to do anything with them and have any products with them. I don't want them to make a penny off of Owen. And I don't know if you're aware, but I had like another issue with them where they were selling all of this like tapes and things of Owen. And we actually, unfortunately, had another lawsuit against them that lasted 3 years where, they were selling stuff behind my back. And so then, it just was left such a distaste, and I just never even entertained the thought of having merchandise of Owen, because I always was thinking it had to be linked with the WWE. So this is really great. And I didn't realize how much wrestling has evolved, and that there are different companies that can produce things. And so anyway, that was all thanks to the Dark Side of the Ring and Vice Media, who we've worked together to create these commemorative Owen Hart t-shirts. And so I'm really glad for the fans, because there hasn't been any merchandise, and for obvious reasons, but now we can change that, and we can at least let them have like a t-shirt, and it's nice because all the proceeds go to the Owen Hart Foundation, and the t-shirts are beautiful, and they all come with a certificate of authenticity, so that it's an official Owen Hart Foundation t-shirt. And it's really nice because they can celebrate Owen, and they can know that all the proceeds are going to go to the Owen Hart Foundation, and that with those funds we will do exceptional work in the community. So I think it's such a win-win. And like I said, Owen loved his fans, and the fans were amazing to him. So it's really nice, because that was always the sad part for me, that the fans were left out in the cold, and there was really nothing I could do about it, because I just didn't want to work with the WWE and have them profit off of Owen's death. And so, I'm so excited. And I was so happy with Ryan, who runs the company, and they've just been so lovely to me, and they've created just the most beautiful t-shirts. I'm so pleased with them. So they've used our picture that we used from our Owen Hart Foundation of Owen, which is my favorite picture of Owen, actually. it's a painting, but it's from a real picture of him, in the ring, and so I don't know. It's just my favorite picture, and so I'm glad that people are going to be wearing it and helping us too. That's really nice.
Was there a situation, and I'm trying to remember, because again, this goes back 15, 20 years, and there's so many details of your legal battle that I remember, and one of them wasn't there some legal strategy involving royalties in the middle of that case where they wanted you to accept royalties as a way to somehow weaken your case? Am I remembering something wrong? Or something along those lines?
Yeah, what they were doing, it wasn't royalties. They were sending checks. They were sending Owen sort of paychecks. And in a way of like sort of weakening our case. Like, I never accepted any of the checks, but I think that was sort of like a strategy, right? That if I was accepting the wages, like kept taking the checks, that I can't remember exactly what the details were, but there was something to that effect, that it would have been a negative for me to take those checks, because Owen he was gone already, So, and I never took one of them. So, yeah, I know there were so many of these little details that were always trying to undercut me and undermine me, and it was just, it was such a terrible time. And, and I'm so grateful. I know we kind of mentioned with my kids and everything, but, I personally had the best mom who was so great to me, and my sister Virginia, who were pillars of, strength and helped me too. So that's, it's a blessing when you have solid people in your life.
Again, you were living a normal life, your normal routine, and then this week comes up and you're doing a lot of media, and it's bringing back all of these different memories and everything like that. I mean, how has this week been for you?
Yeah, it's been mixed emotions for sure. But at the same time, I'm really happy that, like I said, it's a story that should have been told a long time ago. And, for all those reasons that I gave earlier, it wasn't possible. And now I feel like people really are going to know the true story behind it. And I think they'll have a real understanding where I stand, why I've never wavered. I've always had my true convictions and just wasn't willing to budge, And I think people will really know that now. They'll understand why. And I think they'll be supportive, and they'll see, what really happened. And that's important. It's important to know the facts. And now let's move forward.
Were you surprised at all that WWE actually responded to some of the stuff? Because, I was taken aback more because of the timing of it. Not that it wouldn't happen at some point, but when it happened, I was like, whoa, I can't believe they're doing that this week.
I know. And that's where, too, I wasn't surprised, like I said, in my response, that they would trot out their legal counsel, Jerry McDivitt, because it's really damning for the company, for people to hear this stuff. They've tried to keep a lid on it for a long time. And when people hear what actually happened, it doesn't reflect well on the company. And also, too, as I mentioned, Linda McMahon, she was the acting CEO at the time when Owen died. And, she has quite a few ties with President Donald Trump and his administration. So I'm sure they're not pleased about that either. But like I said, the truth has always been my defense. And I'm not here to bash anybody. I'm not here to try to hurt anybody. But I'm really glad that finally my story could be told, because it never has been in this sort of platform. And I'm sure they're worried about the impact it will have.
When you were doing the suit, one of the things that I guess was controversial, and this is from their end, was that when you did the suit, I guess Lumar, the people who made the shackle, you did not, and they WWE ended up suing them. which was another unique aspect of the story in the sense that WWE ended up getting pretty much most of their costs in a settlement from their insurance company. But you made the decision, to sue WWE and not the Shackle company, even the Shackle company, obviously. WWE was, it was their decision. All of those things that happened because of WWE. But the Shackle was also the thing that failed, so there is that aspect of it too. So, was there any specific reason for this, or?
Yes. Well, okay. So when we embarked on the lawsuit, we did have LUMAR. We were suing LUMAR. We sued everybody. You put everybody into the lawsuit. This is
even
what lawyers do.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, they kind of cover all the bases, and then once you start investigating, you let people out of the lawsuit. It's well, now we've kind of checked, and these guys there's no liability here, so you let them out. And so what was happening in the lawsuit was that was the process. That we were learning, we were doing depositions, we were we deposed the riggers. We had affidavits from every top rigging company and person in the business. WWE had no one, not a single rigger would stand up on their behalf at all. They were 100% on our side. And so then as the process was going, like I mentioned, the harness that they used for Owen, it wasn't meant for suspending people. It was meant for dragging people. So it wasn't that the harness had failed. It was inappropriate how they used it, but the harness itself didn't fail, right? Even though it was cutting off the circulation, because it wasn't meant for that purpose. And the LUMAR clip is a sailboat clip. It's not meant for human use at all. They sell it. It's a sailboat clip. It's sold on sailing sites. And so the clip itself didn't fail. It wasn't meant for humans to begin with. And then there was the ropes as well. So the company that designed the ropes as well. So there were three equipment manufacturers that were in our lawsuit. And as we went through, we decided that, none of these companies were at fault because their equipment was fine. It was just used inappropriately. The problem with LUMAR was unlike the other two manufacturers, they had $50 million of insurance money. And so when we let them out of the lawsuit, that was just, the WWE couldn't believe it because, they were like, why would you let them out? They have all this insurance money. But what they didn't realize was that I didn't care about the money. I wouldn't have taken 1 cent from LUMAR because they were not responsible for Owen's death. Their clip was meant for the sole use of sailboats. It was never meant to rig people, and they weren't guilty. So I let them out because I didn't want money. I was going to trial. I wanted, accountability. I wanted the guilt to lie where it should, and it wasn't with LUMAR. So then when WWE, when we settled our case, they went after LUMAR for money, to reclaim some of the money. And LUMAR settled with them, but they made sure that in the settlement that they took no responsibility for Owen's death. And the WWE agreed to that, so they didn't care because all they care about is money, and that's all they cared about before, during, after, and to this day. So, this is the story behind the all the equipment and the reason why we let them out and the reason why WWE went after them. They didn't go after the guys that made the harness. Why not? Because you know what? They didn't have any money. So there was no insurance money with the harness company. There was no insurance money with the ropes company. They only cared about LUMAR because they had insurance money.
When it comes to the city of Kansas City, did they ever explain to you why they didn't just take over at that moment? Because, you talked about on the show, and it's been talked about for 20 years, there was a death right there, and where I'm going because you've talked about it already.
Well, I don't know why, like the police weren't called right away and that they didn't like shut everything down and investigate. But there was a criminal investigation after, and it wasn't that they didn't think that criminal charges couldn't be filed. I talked to the prosecutor, and as you know, taxpayers pay when trials happen, and so they just didn't feel like they had a high enough sort of percentage of conviction. I guess they only take cases if they think they have a 90% rate of conviction, and they didn't think it quite met that bar, so that's why they weren't able to sort of prosecute on a criminal level, but that didn't affect our civil case at all. So, and it wasn't like they didn't think they weren't guilty of something, it was just that they didn't know if they could get a conviction.
Two things, Martha. One, to the fans listening right now, how would you like them to remember your husband? And two, what can fans do to honor the legacy and the memory of Owen Hart?
Well, I'm happy that they came to know Owen as the wrestler, and I think what this whole episode has shown them is just the other side, behind the curtain, the man, and, which was even better than the wrestling persona. So now I think they have the full picture. And so I would hope, I always think give credit where it's due and remember him for the tremendous athlete that he was and the great wrestler that he was. And I encourage people to, honor him and watch his matches and enjoy all that, the entertainment that he provided. But when you do, just remember that the person behind that persona was equally, if not more, amazing, and that he was really just the kindest person. And I told this story to Chris Jericho that, Owen was always so philanthropic, and, he supported a lot of charities. He was really involved with the Children's Hospital. He would go and visit terminally ill kids. He would go do speeches at schools. He supported Special Olympics. So he was always doing sort of organizational charitable events. But then he also just, out of the blue, he was just always trying to help people no matter what it was. The guy broken down on the side of the road, pull over, help him change a tire, push the car out of the way. Or if he just saw someone down and out, he always willing to help. And there was one story that was just remarkable that he was checking out of his hotel and he saw this homeless guy, and he'd had the room, he was going to have the room for until the next day or something like that. I don't know how it worked, but he went to the guy and he said, listen, here's my room key. Go have use my room. Go have a shower, have a good sleep in the bed. There's pizza in the fridge. Just don't break anything. So he gave him his room, and those were the kinds of things that he would do. And the other thing too, I think why, even though he wasn't like a lot of the wrestlers, he wasn't a drinker, and he just was different, but I think they loved him so much because he didn't care, he was just so accepting of everybody. He just accepted people at face value. He never judged anybody. It was live your life how you want to. This is how I live my life. Accept me, and I accept you too. He just was always trying to lead by example, and but accepted everybody just at face value. So they never felt like he judged them, or it just wasn't like that. He was just accepting and helpful. If he could help you, he would help you. And even one time I remember, someone really did something wrong to him, and then he went and he got their kids tickets to the show or something. And I said to him, why would you do that? Because, wasn't that guy just terrible to you? And he said, yeah, I know. He said, but it's not the kid's fault. And so, that was just he was so wise, and he could just see, he was so reflective, and he could see things that other people couldn't see. And he always found the value somehow in people, and just always was spinning things to the good, which was something that, a gift that he left for me too. And so that's what I hope people remember. And they can honor him, like I said, enjoy his matches. And if you want to help the foundation, all donations get a tax receipt. And if you want to buy a T-shirt and celebrate Owen along with us in this episode and know the truth, what really happened, and know that all the proceeds are going to the Owen Hart Foundation, all for the good. And then that's how you can celebrate him. And that's sort of my motto, in life is everything for the good. So not that everything that happens to you in life is good, but just try to find the good in what happens to you and leave the rest.
Martha, I want to thank you so much for this.
Is there a social platform where fans can connect with the Owen Hart Foundation?
We have our Owen Hart Foundation website. We also have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have Instagram, and then of course I have my movie blog, and I do try my best to respond, and people just need to give me a bit of time to catch up, but they can reach out, and there's lots of platforms and social media where they can reach us and send us their comments or whatever they want to do, and that would be lovely.
Dave and Brian will be back tonight with another Wrestling Observer Radio. Dr. Martha Hart, thank you so much for your time and being so generous.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.